All right.
Yeah.
Now we are live. Okay, Joe. So, again, thanks so much for being here. And can you just
Sure.
tell us a little bit about the basics about you? What you're,
Okay.
your life.
Well, I'm pretty much your ordinary Joe. I'd say that my story probably, if anything, I wanted to have an opportunity just to kind of share my journey, because I think it's probably something a lot of people can relate to, because it wasn't it was just a progressive growth. Things that happened along the journey were very timely, synchronistic occurrences that made it impossible to deny that there was something greater going on in my life than simply something that I could have orchestrated just on my own. Um, I had a pretty dramatic conversion experience back in '83. Was when I first had an experience. Of course, before that, growing up, I'd always, I grew up, I was raised Catholic, which I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate to as well. And, so I had a lot of the rudimentary elements of understanding regarding the story of Jesus, and so forth. And my journey has been primarily coming from a Christian perspective, but it's really transitioned over time to embrace a lot of other truth and understanding that I think is in the Christian tradition, but probably has been buried under a lot of the fundamental religious system and things that that have been have come, and teachings of men that have come up over time that have kind of taken the place of some of the things that even Jesus taught. But the stories back when I was growing up were, they're more like fairy tale type stories. They didn't really. I knew that there was some truth to them, but it still was kind of like seeing things through a glass darkly, so to speak. And but over time, I knew there was something more that was going on. And like I said, I think I was during my teenage years, I was kind of like in a battle between where what was going on in my life and the things I was going on. I was had a lot of addictions at that point in time, and had a radical conversion experience around the time I was 23, where everything it was like knowing that there was something more, and crying out for that reality, and then and asking a higher power, God, to come into my life, so to speak. And sure enough, everything, every desire, every addiction that I had just left me.
Wow.
I was able to quit cigarette smoking cold turkey, quit all the drugs, and it was an amazing experience. I had some, of course, there were key people that were instrumental in speaking into my life at that point in time that I had met along the way. And but my first couple years after that had happened, I had a number of really miraculous experiences, things that were, there's no way you could deny that there's something going on here, whether you want to refer to that as God or the universe speaking to you. But I was pretty heavy into the Bible at that point in time, praying all the time. I'd had some some dreams that had come to me that I'd received an interpretation to afterwards. But one thing in particular that stands out in my experience was that I was, at that point in time, I was still living with my dad, and I found a book in one of the drawers in the room that I was staying in called The Cross of Peace. And I opened the book, and out of it fell this piece of paper. And I looked at the paper, and I realized it was the death certificate of my great grandfather. And that might not seem unusual until I noticed the day that he died was the exact day that I'd found it. And I'm like, I automatically just had this like overwhelming sense of presence coming over me. And then I looked down at the name of the doctor who performed the autopsy. His name was Emmanuel. And then I looked at the hospital that was performed in was St. Joseph. And, you know, all these things come together. The fact that I'd found it on the day that this had happened, it came to me. It was like, you found your own death certificate, that I had died and been raised into a new life. And that was the experiential reality I had at that point in time, was that this was a real experience that I had, that I had died and been resurrected into new life. And, you know, and then the journey continued after that. I mean, I started out in, again, you know, going to church, although that portion of my journey was fairly short by comparison to a lot of people who have stayed in, you know, the institutional system for a long time. I think I was probably exposed to, you know, coming out of Catholicism, and then I got exposed to, you know, non-denominational and then Pentecostal type teachings. And, you know, that went by fairly quickly. I think within a few years, I realized that wasn't where I needed to be. And I think that was primarily because as deeply as I was studying the scriptures, because I spent I'm not a theologian, you know, degreed theologian or anything like that, but I got into the Hebrew and the Greek. I had my Strong's exhaustive concordance, and I searched things out, and I spent a lot of time poring over the scriptures, you know, searching them daily to see what things were true. And it was only a matter of time before I started to realize that a lot of the things that were being taught in fundamental circles were not consistent with what I was seeing or hearing in my spirit. For one of the big ones was the rapture. I was like, this doesn't line up. Now, my views have changed considerably over time concerning a lot of that stuff. It's not probably not even quite the way it was, you know, when I first realized that wasn't consistent, or that didn't resonate with my spirit. I mean, it's been letting go. It's been a lot of the process. I mean, I think it's been harder for a lot of people in terms of the letting go process, because a lot of things that I were seeing spared me from having been so indoctrinated, you know, in the teaching. Now, one of the things I think, you know, we talk about these teachers that come along in our lives and come along, you know, it says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I had that experience progressively over time. And it wasn't necessarily somebody that was a guru in my life that I knew, but writers that the writings just happened to come into my life at that particular time. One of the first ones that I remember, and I don't know if you're familiar, you may be, Bill Britton was one of the first writers that I was exposed to. He had a book called Jesus, the Pattern Son, and another book called Eagle Saints Arise. And Eagle Saints Arise was the first book that I came across that it spoke to me on a level that I never had experienced before. It was not just reading, it was experiencing what I was reading. And it spoke of the manifestation of the sons of God, and you know, that this was a corporate collective experience that some were having. You know, it talked about the first fruits and the harvest and different things of this nature that were seeded in me. And but again, it's one of those things where there were teachings that I felt like, this is not something that's been commonly accepted by the masses. This is something that almost like you are initiated into an understanding that you have no way of. It wasn't because I was smarter or better or more intelligent or anything like that, but it was the reality that I was experiencing that I couldn't deny. And that was just like one of it was like stepping stones in my journey the whole way of each time I get to an understanding, and something would come into my experience, and I'd come across another teaching or another writer that would bring me to the next level of my when I say growth in consciousness or ascension in my understanding. And after Bill Britton, it was George Warnock that I was exposed to. George Warnock had a book called The Feast of Tabernacles that was very instrumental in helping me to understand the Judaism and the symbolism, the type and shadow that was present in the symbology of the Old Testament, and how it related to experiencing Christ. And then it was one of the things that I think probably was the most freeing experience for me in my early understanding of of the Bible and Christianity was a teaching by J. Preston Eby, and that somebody had mentioned it to me, and somebody finally had given me a copy of a friend of mine. And this you got to understand, all along the way, I've met people, run into people, had experience. I as an example, when I was still working at Bob Evans as a host at this point in time. Again, this is probably back in late 80s. I had come back from Portland, Maine. I had been a part of a group led by Gene Edwards, who wrote The Divine Romance and a couple other books that were fairly well known at that point in time. But I'd come back, and I was working in the restaurant industry, and I had read that book by George Warnock, The Feast of Tabernacles. But my wife and I had been living in Cincinnati for probably about 6 months to a year, and looking for, really, we were at that point outside of institutionalized Christianity. Weren't really attending anywhere. We'd been primarily involved in home fellowship and things of this nature. So this guy walked in with a copy of The Feast of Tabernacles, and I'm like, what are the odds? What are the odds that I'd be working here and that somebody would? So I found out. I asked him, where'd you find it? Where'd you get this book? And he said, my boss gave it to me. I go, well, who's your boss? And found out, his boss, a buddy. This was somebody that I wound up contacting to ask about, I said, there aren't a lot of people that are walking in this level of understanding, are seeing these kinds of things. When I saw, this guy walk in with his book, I had to give you a call. And again, these connections build over time. I started meeting with him. I ran into some other people. They introduced me to another person that we wound up getting together for, some Bible studies. And those were some of the best times, because we'd all sit around. I mean, everybody played an instrument. Somebody played the flute, somebody played the piano, somebody played guitar, and we would sit around, singing praise songs and getting in deep into the understanding of the scriptures. So, I mean, it was a real growth time during this time for me, and really seeing again that there was a spiritual influence in my life, call it God, spirit, because I don't want to tag labels on a lot of things, because my experience every step of the way has been higher. Let go of your prior preconceptions and understandings, because this road goes deeper and higher, and further than anything you could possibly imagine. Well, again, one of the people that had come into my life had mentioned J. Preston Eby to me, and that was when my first exposure to the teaching of ultimate reconciliation or universal salvation. And that's another label. People want to call themselves universalists, or it even goes beyond that. But that teaching in and of itself, after I really started, I'm like, well, there's too much truth here for me to cast it, for me not to look into this further. And once I started to read more about that, I was like, oh my gosh, it totally took the shackles off. I had this overwhelming sense of peace that God was not some abominable tyrant that was ready to cast us into the flames of hell for all eternity. And I started to see all of the different symbolism in Scripture in a much different way at that point in time. And again, it was a progression. It was like every point in time, I was like I was letting go of some of my previous ideas about certain things and embracing something higher. I think I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Wilber. He's deemed by some to be one of the greatest philosophers of our time. But he wrote a book called A Brief History of Everything. And he talks about integral spirituality, and that there's that everything it kind of like connects all the dots for you. You can see how everything fits together, but every level. But he talks about how every progression, like from atoms to molecules, and molecules to to cells, and cells to your whole metabolism, that it's a transcend and include. Everything transcends, but it includes everything before it. So you're not tossing out everything that happened and it happened before that. You're merely recognizing and integrating all of those things into the totality of your experience. And that's really what it's been for me all along the way. It's been a transcending and including and integrating those things that happened prior, that were all a part of my journey. And now, I think some of the other things that started to happen, I got exposed to the Kabbalah. I got exposed to Course in Miracles. Somebody handed me a copy of the Course in Miracles, and boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, that was another one of those books that it spoke beyond the letters in the book, where it cut through all of my ego defenses, and spoke right to my heart, to a point where I just knew, that, wow, this is like a divine message coming to me that, is helping me to, to grow in my understanding, and let go of a lot of the attachments, the fears, the attachments that we cling to, that we've been taught to believe, and beginning to embrace something more. And I'm kind of going on a little bit here. Is there?
No, go. You're dropping all kinds of breadcrumbs. Thank you. Keep going.
Well, anyway, so yeah, it was just, I could probably go on naming some of the another teacher that came into my experience that was another mind blow, was Joel Goldsmith. Once I got exposed to the writings of Joel Goldsmith, it was another one of those experiential realities where I saw things in a whole different way than I had ever seen them before. I was going through a real hard time financially, which I'm sure everybody's going to be able to relate to at some point in their experience. They've gone through some dark financial period. And I was reading, I'd had a copy sitting in my cart on my Amazon shopper for forever, called The Infinite Way. And it's like The Infinite Way. I finally pulled the trigger and I bought the book. And there's a passage in there that he brings up in scripture, and he has a very metaphysical, mystical. I mean, he goes from the metaphysical to the mystical. He really makes the distinction between the metaphysical and the mystical, and how we make that journey from coming out from that metaphysical experience to the mystical. And the verse that's really, it was like, have I never read that before? How many times have I read that and missed it? That God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having everything in all things, may abound unto every good work. And I'm like, how did I not see that? And it's like, having all sufficiency in all things may abound. And I'm like, wow, is that my experience, or is that real? And and it was like they talk about having a Rhema, the Rhema word, the difference between the Logos and the Rhema, and that this was a quickening experience. Well, I read that and it resonated so deeply in my spirit. And my occupation is I'm a corporate recruiter. At that time, I was third party recruiting, and I actually had my own business called Focused Hire, and I was in kind of a play on words there. Focused hire, like a hiring of people.
Nice.
But anyway, yeah. It was like within a couple days after I had that experience, like that word resonated so deeply in my being. A client I hadn't heard from in a while called me out of the blue and wound up giving me a $12,000 retainer to do a search for him. And again, it was one of the, these experiences that come at just the right time to solidify and crystallize your understanding of things, and recognizing that, yes, there is an omniscience, there is an omnipresence, there is a greater reality, a deeper, a higher level of understanding and consciousness that we can exist in, even though we're going through our temporal experience and our, mortal, what did Wayne Dyer say? We're spirits having a human experience, and that's really been what it's been all about, is I'm a spirit having a human experience. I'm going through these things, but yet I recognize that the reality of my being is so far greater than just my physical experience, than just this dimension of physicality and mortality. And so anyway, then it, just that all the different teachers that came along after that, I mentioned Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, all of these, Marianne Williamson, there are so many, beautiful spirits that are expressing themselves. And, a lot of these things were labeled taboo or new age. I said, and I started writing, and one of the things I wrote, I said Jesus was a new ager. I mean, he was speaking about, he talked about a new age, and the age to come. And I think that a lot of the things he said were spoken because he spoke in parables, were spiritual realities he was trying to convey that people were not, they couldn't wrap their mind around it. They couldn't comprehend it on a mental level. And that's why I say some of the things that I've experienced over time were things that, even though I might not be able to, and that's, I guess, I'm a big person on words too. I'm like the person that loves to analyze words and the origin of words and understand their meaning. But at the end of the day, I came to the point that I realized that words are inadequate. There's no way you can articulate the ineffable. There's just not, there have been experiences I've had that I can't put into words. And I think that we all ultimately have to come to the point that we realize that the experiential reality is more important than our ability to be able to, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, I can't express myself as good as you can, or I can't say it. I said, that's not important. It's the experiential reality. the essence of your being, who you are. That's, and understanding that everybody plays a role. I was talking about, integrating and including. Everybody has an instrumental part, whether we're talking about different religious traditions, different cultural orientations, different sexual orientations. Everybody has a part of the whole. And I think that's a lot of what we've lost. If I were to try to describe what I felt like my purpose was, in this life, in this existence, I would say to be a repairer of the breach, to be a restorer of paths to dwell in, to be somebody that stands in the gap and is able to communicate, from even using some of the understanding of Christian literature and some of that background, to be able to help people to understand how it all ties together with, whether we're talking about Buddhism or Hinduism or, these different religious, Sufism, Kabbalah, all of them have a common thread. There's a common thread that runs through all of them. And, I've seen a lot of people that have been set free from bondage to fundamental Christianity, and some of the fear-based theology and teachings there have cast Jesus out with the dirty bathwater, baby. They've thrown the baby out with the dirty bathwater. They've gone deep into other stuff. And, I have my experience with Christianity, or with Jesus in particular, was so real, that I can't deny that. I have to understand my roots, and the fact that that's, I can't discard everything that I experienced coming from that background. But I can embrace all of the other, all the other teachings, and see that, they're all valid. There's validity to every one of them, and truth that's in every one of them. In fact, some would say that a lot of the teachings of Christianity, a lot of the stories, are, like Buddha is a good example. Buddha came out of basically Hinduism, and it began to teach something different than what all of the religious leaders of his day. The stories are so similar and so parallel. It's amazing that more don't understand or don't realize that there is this common thread. And and ultimately, what is love and oneness? Love and unity, love and oneness, the connection of all things. Everything is all, it's all tied together. Even to the point now where another big thing that is coming to my experience has been the understanding that science and spirituality, there isn't really, more now, whereas, it's like Plato's shadows on the cave wall, that there's only, you can only go so far in trying to prove the existence of, things based upon the physical elements, the material, objective empirical facts and evidence, because truth isn't facts and evidence. Truth goes beyond the physical facts and the evidence. So they're like shadows on a cave wall that point to something greater, a light that's greater than what we're actually seeing. But at the same time, more and more, they're becoming evidence of the same spiritual truth that has been taught from all wisdom traditions throughout time. Anyway, I think I've gone on for quite a while. Yeah, any specific question?
That's a nice little answer to what's a little bit about you and your life. It's so awesome. It's pretty much what people do.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. I I want to say, like, because you have this good news, you have this beautiful experience, and it's I'm seeing in your share how the people and also the books are helping you so much to understand it and to draw you forward into this reality that's real within you, to make it
Mhm.
in your consciousness in your life. And of course it's like, I want to share this because other people sharing helped me. And
Right.
that land.
Oh, I mean, and that's absolutely, like I said, when you said, if there's anything I want more than anything else, it's for people to be able to share my journey, and for people to be able to relate to it, resonate with it, and said, yes, that's exactly what I've experienced. Or your experience may have been a little different, but the essence of what you got out of that experience was exactly the same. And and to show that how much we are all connected,
Yes.
that our experiences aren't that much different. They're, we go through things, we continue, the journey is more about shedding the ego attachments and the fear and everything else. What did Rumi say? That your task is not to seek for love, but merely to get rid of all the obstacles that would prevent you from the experiencing the reality of that love. And that's really what the journey has been all about. It's shedding all of those things that would prevent us from seeing the reality of who we are. Jesus wasn't talking, didn't limit his experience to himself. He was sharing a experience that was meant to be something that the entirety, the collective experience, their own divinity. And one of the because I am working on I've got a number of different things that I'm working on. And I don't want to die with my music still in me.
Yes.
I've got a book called that I've maybe prematurely titled Conscious Evolution from Christianity to Divinity.
Beautiful.
That it kind of encompasses that journey of coming into an understanding that Jesus wasn't some exclusive being, but was trying to make everybody realize the very reality that the way, the truth, and the life was something that that everybody could experience. That I can say, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and impart that to other people. And I really believe that we become that to others in our lives. We become the truth. We become the life. The more we embrace the reality of our own being, others will experience that, whether they can put it in words or not, whether they just know. It is all about the presence. It is all about the presence. It's them experiencing that presence in, through, as us, and that's going to be it. Ultimately, is even in the midst of all the things that are going on in the world right now, that when we embrace that reality, when we know the light that we are, that is shining through us and in us and as us, that is going out and radiating, and it's affecting people. This conversation right here is impacting people. There's a resonance that's going forth as a result of it that is impacting lives and affecting people. And right now we are going through a period of collectively of shedding the false, the illusory. We've gone through. I mean, we've gone through a period of embracing the divine feminine, which was a necessary aspect of the growth of humanity, to come out from that patriarchal mindset and the dominance of the masculine, to understand that there needs to be a balance between the masculine and the feminine. In fact, I just was listening to Oprah. The Deepak Chopra was doing something with Alicia Keys, and I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. About the divine, a series on meditation on the divine feminine. I'm like, well, it's part of the journey. It's not the totality, but it is a piece of the puzzle. And like the article I wrote recently on the illusion of superiority. isn't about, anybody being better than anybody else. It's about all of us working together, coming together, laying aside our preconceptions, being able to come to the table and, talk about things without judgment. And so letting go of judgments, letting go of fear, letting go. That's the place the journey has led me.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be having this conversation with you, because you're saying a lot of things that are important to me to be said in the world. And you're saying the most delicious of what I hope that you would be saying. So thank you. I'm not disappointed with this conversation.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. And there's so many things I want to talk about. But first I want to say this whole, I really, boy, talk about taking a clip out and sharing it. I might have to do it with this whole part about who we become, our presence, who we're being the way, the truth, the life, radiating the resonance going forward. All this, like, this is my perspective. This is what soul leadership is. We become the new. We become the new, and invite, like the 100th monkey, invite others to
right. Or as James Redfield says, it's there's a point of phase transition when everything critical mass, that everything builds up to a critical mass, and then it goes through a phase transition. It's like that last electron that needs to line up in the molecule in order for it to, or atom, in order for that change to take place. And that's really where I believe we're at as a species collectively, that humanity is at that point where we are evolving in consciousness, that every, and you even see it, it's kind of like it starts out, well, even in my journey spiritually, it's like you see even the progression that's taking place even in religious institutions, have kind of followed along ever since the latter rain movement, and some of the earlier teachings that we embraced, there's been a gradual progression in understanding there as well. So it's impacting everybody. No, there's nobody going to be, no one's going to be left behind.
No one left behind.
That's right.
You're what you're saying is, and it's so helpful. It really one of your main themes I'm seeing, which I already said, is that like we're at a certain place, we have a certain consciousness, and it's so helpful to hear other people say it, watch other people live it, read other people talking about it, because it's like, yes, oh, that's it. And then like we kind of go sledding down that hill,
Right.
And you've shown this so clearly. And I could say, just for me, I could say I never really got it like you're showing it to me, because I understand matching vibration. Like that's the essence of my work. And I understand validation, that's the essence of my work.
Sure.
And also like this whole soul leadership thing, but I haven't understood the focus on reading the books. Like I read books, I get validated, but I see that some get tripped because they read the books and they intellectually believe them, but aren't there.
Right.
And that's where there's a lot of proselytization going on in the culture, and a lot of shoving things down people's throats of people who aren't even there yet. And
Absolutely.
So I find that irksome. So like I see that, but you have me see the other side of it. It's like, oh, and I get it. Like, I had to go to a certain place and experience a certain thing to get permission to get, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Oh, okay, I can live this.
Right.
That's what people are getting, not just in teachers, but in books.
Right.
And the whole resonance of that teacher comes with the book on an energy level. So it makes sense. But thank you. You really put it together for me to understand why people are like, have you read this book? Have you read this book? It's like, because I'm all about, let's have the spiritual experience. Let's have the spiritual experience.
Right. Right.
But that ties it together for people. Everybody comes differently.
Well, I mean, and I'd have to say that, because I come from, I come from a background of being primarily, it was analytical, intellectual standpoint, and had to make part of my progression was transitioning to the emotional, the intuitive side. That because it wasn't all about the experience for me initially, it was all about the intellectual understanding. So I had to make the journey from that, having the intellectual understanding, to experiencing the reality of it, with those little synchronistic experiences and different things that happen along the way.
Yeah.
And one of them was that the Course in Miracles was a big step in that direction, because the brother that had shared the Course in Miracles with me, he was somebody that had showed up at one of our home fellowships, and he was pretty much treated like an outcast by most of the people there, because he talked in a way that sounded New Age-ish to most of the people, even though they were coming from a reconciliation, ultimate salvation background. They still judged this guy.
Yeah.
And I found myself, and this is one of the reasons why I talk about being a repairer of the breach and restorer past the dwelling, because not only is it repairing the gap that exists between people and their understanding and knowing of God, but the breach that exists between each other, the separation mentality that we have, that we're all separate. Yes, we're all unique individuals and our unique expressions, but we're all connected. And what you do to somebody else, you do to yourself. That understanding. I feel like a lot of times I have to be the mediator, the translator, to take, okay, you're saying this, you're saying the exact same thing that Jesus was saying here, to try to get everybody to realize we're not worlds apart here. We're saying, what does it say in Zephaniah, that he'll turn his people to a pure language? And to me, that language is spirit, because regardless of the terminology or the verbiage that you use to communicate truth is truth. It doesn't make any difference whether we talk about, power, energy, or God. Whether you're using even in the scriptures, the word, it says that when it talks about doing mighty works, or the working of the Spirit, that word working is in the Greek is the word energeo, which is what we get our word energy from, or energizing. So it's the energizing of spirit, and so again, drawing a parallel between the different expressions for people to be able to see it's all connected. There isn't a great disparity between. Anyway, I connected so much with this guy that I eventually wound up not going to the meetings anymore. But he'd given me a copy of the Course in Miracles. But the thing that really impressed me about him was that he didn't have any indoctrination in terms of teachings or things that he believed, because this was the doctrine of this or that he had to understand. It was all experiential for him. It was all experiential, and it spoke to me. It really did. It was like, I wish I had a little more of that. I wish I had more experience. You know what I mean? In fact, there was one time when he'd come to my house. I'd had this experience where I went to Barnes and Noble's bookstore, and I was in the metaphysical section, and I was looking through the books, and there was this one book that just was jumping off the shelf at me, and I'm like, it was called Ascension, and it was written by the Ishayas, and I didn't know what this book was, but it was encased in plastic, so I couldn't really rip off the plastic to open it up to read it, but I contemplated buying it. And I mean, I sat in front of the shelf for a while contemplating buying this book. Well, I eventually, didn't listen to my intuitive self at that point in time and went home. And, I got together with this brother like the following day, the one that gave me the Course in Miracles. And I told him about this experience, about this. And he goes, no way. He goes, I had that book in my car and was bringing it to you. And I wound up giving it to somebody else before I got here. And, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It was another one of those synchronistic moments where, it's all connected. It's all connected. And I went, of course, we got in the car, we went to the bookstore, I bought the book. And and it was definitely, it tied together everything from the book of Revelation to the seven chakras in the body and all the, it was one of those type of revelatory writings. But again, it was knowing the experience, having the experience, and it took somebody as sensitive and as intuitive as he was coming into my life that had come at the scriptures from a primarily experiential standpoint to recognize, to actually bring that experience, one of those aha moments, that, the aha moment of, wow, that's what it's like, to have the experience of, something crystallizing and you just know, yeah, because it's beyond believing at this point. We talk about, belief, but it really, in our experience now, it's about knowing. It's not about believing at all. There isn't any doubt in my mind at this point,
Right.
so.
Oh, gorgeous. And so the way I know you and what I know is that it seems to me that you invest in and share a ridiculous amount, like a consistent flow of real gifts for the world, of different, like little essays, little subjects, little, I don't know what you call them, but
Right.
really packed.
Chapters in a book.
Considered, not fly by night crap, really considered, useful. And this is an incredible labor of love. I don't see you making like tons of money on it. I don't know what you're doing, but like, tell me about this, because this is huge. What you're doing is it just keeps building.
I really appreciate that because again, just knowing that others resonate with my experience, knowing that others, identify with the journey, or that I'm expressing something or articulating something in a way that they may have been searching for words to be able to say it, and being able to bring that, it is a gift. It is a gift. And I share it as such. I'm not trying to share it in a way. Yes, I want to publish a book. I'm not going to, but do I want to make tons of money off of it? No, I really, it's never been about the fame or writing to try to get acclaim or anything like that. It really has been about sharing my truth, sharing the things that I've experienced, sharing my understanding in a way that other people can identify with it and relate to it, and maybe benefit in their experience because they realize, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people that see things that way. And one of the things I was going to say, one of the things that I'd heard early on was that if you've got something to share, there's somebody that needs to hear it. And I would tell anybody that it doesn't matter who you are. If you have something to share, there's somebody that needs to hear it and to do it. And that's really been, whether, it doesn't need to be a large platform. It doesn't need to be a huge audience. If there are people that are within your circle of influence that you can speak into their lives, or that you can, do things, and it's something that they appreciate and resonate with, then do it, because you never know. know whose life you're going to touch, who is going to need just what you have to say at that particular time. And that's really been the reason why I felt, oh gosh, gonna get me choked up. I just felt this, compelled to do it, to write. I mean, there's times I wake up, in the middle of the night, and I'll have to start writing things down. I'll get inspired and have to, where's this coming from? Where's this coming from? Like that quote that I just posted the other day. That quote was actually about the present moment, about being a catalyst for new realities. Came out of a group meeting. I have a group of people that I get together with. We do a FaceTime or a Zoom meeting once a month, called Raising the Vibrational Frequency, and it was all about the limitation of the known and how we limit ourselves through our labeling, the definitions we give things and the labels we put on things, and that we prevent ourselves from experiencing things in the present moment because we're coming at it with this I know that, you have to say I know well, come at it with a I don't know anything perspective. It's a lot easier to really experience the present moment when you do that, when you're not attached to or limiting yourself by trying to see it from your past experience. And but anyway, that came out of that was an experiential thing that came out of a meeting with a group of folks that we get together. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it's the empty cup thing.
Yeah.
Nice. And that raising the vibrational frequency, is that a peer group? Is that something you lead?
It's something I started. I came up. It's basically an IM group instant message group that I started with a group of people. And
it was an I am, and I'm thinking I am.
Yes, exactly. It's an I am group.
That's wrong.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect because really, that's exactly what it is. It's an I am group.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you guys just share. It's not like you lead. Do you facilitate?
I'll come up with a I think we'll try to come up with a subject like this last time was being a catalyst. And that was the kind of like the launching pad that we use. But it's kind of pretty much go with the flow type of thing. Not a structured. I've never been much about being a structured, having structured meetings as far as that goes, because to me that can inhibit the flow. If you try to put too many, too much structure on it or limit it to certain input.
Right. So, oh God, there's so many things I want to talk about. All right. So I just want to go back just for a moment and point out yet another very strong, from my opinion, soul leadership thing that you're talking about is, if I have something to share, there must be someone who needs to hear it. I believe that it doesn't matter if it's one person or a million people that are listening, right? Like you're saying, it doesn't have to be a huge platform. We make that difference. Even for one person can be the world. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Save one soul, save the world, right? I mean, I forget who said that, but I completely embrace that because if we really believe that the totality is included in us, that we are microcosms of the macrocosm and vice versa, that it really is the impact that we have affects everybody. It's a ripple. It's a ripple that goes out throughout, the cosmos and the universe.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it's so refreshing to talk to you about these things because so many want to physicalize, bring the markers of physical success into the spiritual game. But you don't matter because you're not making X amount of money, you don't have X amount of followers, you don't have, right? Like it's fascinating to watch that happen.
Right.
And because we're human and we fall into our old patterns sometimes. So I'm just, this is another part I just want to call out about this whole leadership. Like, that's not what it matters. Yeah, we get money. Yeah, we influence people, but like, that's not at all the focus. It's just,
Right.
can I bring what I have to say because I'm impelled to say it?
Well, I think that was always part of the one of the stumbling blocks with regard to institutionalized, Christianity or religion in general, is the fact that people didn't really have the opportunity. Their talents are used more than they're used to build the system, more than they're being used to encourage growth. You usually have one person that's pretty much in charge of the whole show, so everybody's not on an equal plane. There isn't this, it's not the building up of the body in order for everybody else to be able to function in their own. That's what any kind of leadership's got to be about. It's got to be about building people up to the point that they're able to their own selves, come into their own divinity, be fully express themselves in the fullness of their being, not to be cookie cutter images of some person that's standing up as their leader. So that, yeah, I completely embrace that. That's really what leadership's got to be about. It isn't what Apostle Paul said. That's not about lording it over the flock, and yet that's really what you've got in so many different circles, is somebody lording it over the flock and keeping people in line. They can't step out of line. If they do, then there's certain behaviors and practices and rules that they need to follow, or otherwise they're not considered. They'll be excommunicated or whatever.
Yes. And I want to say, there's so many well-meaning people in the church, and I do want to, and there's so many people doing wonderful things. I want to say, it's not just the leader's fault, it's the followers' fault. Like, if they're right, like I what comes to mind when you're talking is Moses is like, yeah, well, come with me up the mountain. No, you go up the mountain, and then you come back and tell us what God said.
Tell us what you heard.
It's like, and this is the human condition, I think.
Right.
It's like, we want the safety and comfort in.
Or want Saul. They want Saul to rule over them, right? They want Saul to rule over them.
And then the next thing we're sheep.
Right.
But like, who did we choose to be sheep? Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, not question. I mean, and I think not questioning. A lot of people are in the place where they never question. They never question the things they're taught, because it was spoken from somebody with supposed authority who had X number of degrees and gone to school to learn this stuff. And so, because they are coming from a position of authority, they tend to believe it regardless, without questioning it. And, but I don't know if it's something that was inherent in me from the beginning, but learning to question things, being somebody that would question and challenge it. Why is that true? Because ultimately that's, even when you think you've reached a plateau, you've reached that, because I know there was a point in my experience where I felt like I'd reached the pinnacle. And I was like, no, you haven't. You aren't even close. This is infinite. This is infinite. This is not, it's infinite. There's no end to this progression. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
I really appreciate that about the integral work, that it's honestly, it's some of my best spiritual direction. There's times where I hit something gnarly, or I get to a plateau, and I'm like, well, let's see what the system says as validation. And it's like, oh, okay, this is in the realm of normal. Okay, keep going. Like, I really like that about the integral work. It's a really good mirror for me along the way. It's never exactly, but it's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
pretty good. And then I forget about it and I go on my way and then, I'm like, this is weird. Let me see what the integral says. Okay. I don't know. Have you noticed that kind of thing?
As far as looking for validation from others that may be on the same plane as me, or
Oh, not others. I mean the actual the actual integral structure, the actual this is where I am. And
oh, gotcha. Yeah, it's hard not to. I think I liked what Wilbur said when he said that it's only intended to be a map of consciousness, but we're talking about a place that we're talking about something that when you break out of it, you don't need the map anymore.
yeah.
It's like a prison break. You need even in a prison break, you need a map. But once you
Yeah.
break out of prison, the map's irrelevant. And
Yeah.
so I think we can measure ourselves. We can measure, I think it is human nature to want to measure your growth and your development and see, okay, where am I at on the scale of consciousness? But everybody's developed in different ways. I think one of the things he points out is that, we've got, quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. So you've got the different lines of development, you've got the different levels of development, and people are developed in different areas at different levels.
Yeah.
Not every, like we were talking about the emotional and the intellectual, that it's all about coming into harmony and balance in all these different areas of our lives, and an understanding, being willing to recognize, okay, I could contend to develop more over here. I could use a little bit more growth in this particular area.
Yes.
And because every one of us has areas that we could grow or develop or learn, and it's about pushing. To me, it's about pushing those boundaries in our lives. And one of the things about being a catalyst that I was impressed by, because I started reading a book by Joe Dispenza called Becoming Supernatural, and he talks about creating new experiences in our lives, and the only way we do that is by changing up the different things that we do, doing different things, thinking things differently, perceiving things differently. Coming out of what David Hawkins, the way he would have described it, would be called recontextualization, that we see it from a completely different. We look at our past and we recontextualize our experiences and bring them to a new level of understanding as to the reasons why. That's how we transcend and include. That's how we integrate our past experiences, is by recontextualizing them in the present moment and recognizing that we wouldn't be here having this conversation right now if it were not for all the different events that had brought us to this place and time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. So have you considered, you've put a good deal of energy into these little essays. Have you considered just putting them together in a book or something?
I have a number of chapters of a book like I said, that one, I think I mentioned earlier, Conscious Evolution from Christianity to Divinity. I've compiled a number of different chapters of like 4 or 5 different books that are at different varying stages of development. And life is life. It's sometimes having the time to be able to do all the things you want to do. Have a YouTube channel that's partially started, which is called Infintegral, which is infinitely integral.
I love it.
So that was my next vision. And of course, I've got a couple web addresses reserved for integral spirituality too, that ultimately it's on my, it's one of those things that's on the agenda, it's on the plate, and I'm working little pieces, piece by piece. You work, if you don't establish the intention to work in a direction, it never happens. And I try to do like those writings, if nothing else, having those moments of inspiration, moving forward with the writing, and ultimately integrating it as a chapter of a book. That's the end goal. But if you don't take those little steps to do it along the way, it never happens. So
yes, here's an invitation for this little part. Okay, I'll do it. I won't do it. There's an invitation.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. So what is your daily life, your daily, weekly life? What does your life look like?
No, right. I mean, I have the opportunity right now. I work remotely. I'm a corporate recruiter for Ronstadt SourceRight. And I can work out of my own home doing that. I have accounts. I think they're ranked number one in the world right now in terms of the organizations that that companies outsource their recruitment to. And I have a particular account that I handle all the recruitment for all the different locations for that company in the United States. And that's the contract I'm on right now, working for Ronstadt. So that's what I do during the week. I work from home. But I mean, it's what I did as a third party recruiter, because I at one point in time I had my own business that I mentioned earlier that I worked for my own. So I was really accustomed to time management, working at home, doing that kind of thing. So I'm able to do that now. Only it's for a larger company that has contracts with all these different corporations. So,
Nice.
But I mean, as far as I'd say, like I said, it's a pretty ordinary existence in terms of, having. I mean, maybe ordinary is not the right word, because then I think about, well, there's a lot of people that don't. I'm pretty blessed. I'm pretty blessed in terms of, being, whatever you want to say as far as material means, and being, having good things in life that I can enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And to a large degree, we do create our own reality. So I think, when we talk about gratitude and appreciation for the things we have, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that, we have, this has been a trying year. We've gone through some times, a lot. There's been some deaths in the family. My wife fell and broke her shoulder. Just had to have a shoulder replacement surgery a couple of weeks ago. So, I have a daughter and a grandson that live at home with us, because after the whole pandemic thing, she was working in a couple different arenas that were impacted by that, and things have been kind of slow coming back. So, those are the normal things that are going on in my life.
Just a normal life. Yes. And do you have any particular spiritual practice that you enjoy?
I meditate. I take time in the morning to get quiet, to breathe, to focus on my breath, and just be present. And that helps me center my day. It doesn't take really long to do that anymore. I mean, there was a point in time, I think it was when I went through my deep financial, it was probably the second time it had happened, where we went through a real dark financial period. Was about 5 years ago. And it got to a point where I had to meditate. I had to spend time. But it was like a breakthrough experience for me, where it didn't matter what was going on externally. It didn't matter how dark things looked or how bad things looked. I could find that center, that place of peace within me, and know that it was all going to be okay, that I was okay, that things weren't, it wasn't about circumstances. It was about my state of being, and about just knowing who I was, and trusting and believing that, there was nothing going to happen that I wasn't going to be able to face. And that's when things changed. That's when doors opened. I just like the $12,000 retainer that came that one time with when I was reading Goldsmith. It was a situation where things had been hit. The economy had taken a downturn, and a lot of people that were in the recruiting industry, self-employed, were going out of business. Like 90% of, I mean, it's quite a large percentage that went through a really hard time. And so I was looking for employment, and out of a clear blue sky, a friend of mine had referred me, and I, for a couple different things, and I'd interviewed with the company I'm working for now. And I'd done it a couple times, but out of a clear blue sky, guy calls me, interviews me, and hires me almost on the spot, flies me out to Chicago for training the following Monday, and I started my job. They shipped me a laptop, and I started my job the following week. And I'm like, you know,
I know.
I'm just saying, you know, it just, but I know that it was because because of that, finding that peace within, regardless of the outer circumstances, that I allowed myself to be open to the experience and the opportunity when it came up.
Yes.
That I laid aside my preconceptions about the way things needed to be and started to live in the what is. This is the reality. Don't live in what you want, live in what is, and look for the opportunities. Because, you know, that's one of the things that I've had to learn over time too, is that we have expectations and we have intentions, and we can believe that, you know, things are, you know, what do you want to say, that we have infinite potential. But if we have infinite potential, don't limit the way that can be fulfilled. Because
Yes.
a lot of times we have a tendency to look at things and say, okay, this is what I want, and this is the way it needs to happen. And we lay out this plan about how these plans and goals about this agenda about how it's got to unfold.
Yes.
It doesn't always unfold that way.
Right.
You know, I think the Neville Goddard probably talks about having the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but he says that you need to start with that feeling that you're already there. And that's what I had. I had that sense of peace and awareness that everything was going to be okay before it unfolded in my material experience. But I already had the feeling. I didn't need to get somewhere in the future in order to have that awareness. Yes. And a lot of times I think we do that. We put things off into the future. We put the fulfillment or the feeling off into the future, that I'll feel good once I get to that point. No, once you experience it as your present reality, then you'll see those things begin to unfold in your material experience. And that's exactly what happened. So
yes. So it's kind of like that time of difficulty brought you to a new level of operation. And then,
yes.
and then we can make up all kinds of stories, but you were in a new level of operation. So
right. No, I agree completely, because once you have, it's like you can't go back once you've had that experience, that's why I say anymore, it doesn't take but a couple seconds to get that to sense and awareness of the presence of just turning and just knowing, and then you're there, whereas it might have taken effort. People talk about spending hours in meditation and things of this nature, in order to get to some kind of spiritual experience. Anymore, it's just the moment you turn to say, and then you're there. You're just, no effort required.
Yes. And this is not where everyone is, and that's fine. This is you saying, this is where I am now. This is what's possible.
Right.
This is what's possible. And if I needed to meditate for 2 hours to get there, great, do it, because eventually I'll just live there.
Right.
And
yep.
It's worth it.
Yep.
It's so worth it, because not just on the inside, but on the outside, life is good.
Yep. It is. I mean, that's been my experience. It really, and you become more sensitive to things in your experience too, where you don't overlook the things that you might have perceived as ordinary at one point in time. That's another good quote from Dan Millman, Socrates, in the Dan Millman book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He talks about there are no ordinary experiences. I remember when I first read that just blessed me. There are no ordinary experiences. It's all extraordinary. And I think the more we approach life from that perspective, the more we appreciate every moment that we're here, and begin to see beyond the veil, so to speak, of our circumstances, of of what we perceive a person to be, the different people in our lives, even relationships and so forth, that we can see it from a higher perspective. It just, the more real it is, for us. We're not closing the door on things because like I said, because we've got preconceptions or ideas about the way things need to be, or the way they are even. We can begin to live in the present moment and accepting things as they unfold, and that's the only way you can really flow. Like I said, if we make these little changes, we look for opportunities to change things up, to see things differently, not to get stuck in a rut. Again, with the Joe Dispenza, you can get stuck in these habitual mental patterns where you're going through the motions day to day, and if you wind up in the definition of insanity. You do the same thing expecting different results, unless you're doing something different, to create something different. It's always going to be, you're always going to be experiencing the same thing, because you're operating from a past experience of this habitual cycle of things.
Right.
So, whether, we were talking in the meeting I was with the other guys the other night, we were talking about, even doing things differently, like something you normally do with your right hand, do it with your left hand.
Yeah.
They talk of this is all neuro programming.
Goes down to
and to a certain degree, it is about reprogramming your mind. It is about reprogramming your thoughts. And then when your emotions align with your thoughts, when you have, as an example, when you have an experience that lines up, one of those synchronistic experiences that lines up with, that causes that emotion to align with the thought. I may think things are a certain way, but until I have that experience that creates that emotion that aligns with that thought, then they come together, then they integrate, and it becomes a reality. It becomes something that in the essence of your being is real.
Yeah.
Not just because you thought it was real, not because you believed it was real, but because you had the experience that created the emotion that aligned with the thought. And that's, again, that whole, it's all about balance, harmony, alignment, coming into that alignment. And that's, yep.
Yes. Amen. Yeah. Yeah. The pictures where you came up when you were talking is that, like, life is change. Like, there's always change. So can we dance with that ongoingly and not get stuck anywhere? And funny enough, another picture was the circumambulation and how powerful that is, like going around Jericho 7 times. It's like if I go around the whole thing, that's, as a healer, I do that a lot. Like, I'm going around something. I'm not going straight for it. I go around it, and then we understand it better. We can see where the cracks are. We can, right? Like, it's just, we get a holistic experience. And
right,
you're talking about that.
Yep, absolutely.
Like, easy
Because
say.
we get frustrated. We can get frustrated or irritated and aggravated and annoyed if we're stuck in our mental pattern about the way things need to be. We're stuck in this ritual. Something comes to disrupt that. If you're not perpetually teaching yourself this idea of, I need to step out of my comfort zone, I need to do things a little differently, I need to accept this opportunity to have this meeting with Wendy Wolf, don't try, because I, by nature, I'm a pretty private person. I'm not somebody that has put myself, other than my writing, not somebody that puts myself out there a lot, so do something different, change it up, take a risk.
Yes.
The more we do those things, the more of an impact I believe that the ripple effect is going to have, because we're not limiting the possibilities.
Yeah.
Again, it's all about intention, and and just recognizing that there's a purpose in our being here. If we didn't believe that, then we didn't believe we each have a purpose, and that there's something that we individually have to offer that is going to speak into other people's lives, there wouldn't be any reason to even have this conversation, right?
Me too. I'm an introvert, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like
well,
incessantly getting over
that
myself.
speaks loudly to your willingness to step out of your comfort zone. That's for sure.
It really does. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so blessed, Joe. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me and be willing to share
Oh,
with
it was a
people.
pleasure. Really enjoyed it, for sure.
Yeah. It's thrilling to hear what you have to say. It's delicious to be in your presence. It's, it's just, I'm so encouraged and inspired by your story and by your, I don't know, momentum, by your momentum. Your soul momentum is just delicious.
Thank you. No, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good trip. A long, strange
The energetic transmission. That's
yeah.
another person that's really been a blessing. I don't know if you've ever listened to Matt Kahn.
A little bit.
Yeah. I really resonate with his spirit. He really, because he is all about the love, and all about the fact that we're here to elevate the consciousness of humanity, and help raise people up into, not that we're, again, not beating anybody over the head, not telling people they need to be something different than they are,
Yeah.
but bringing people up as we ascend, of helping raise the consciousness of all humanity at the same time. Even Wayne Dyer, I remember him saying that when he talked about power versus force, or that was actually David Hawkins, but he was talking, Wayne Dyer was talking about it, and he said, it's the whole principle that one or two people vibrating at the highest frequency of love have the ability to impact 10,000 vibrating at a lower frequency of fear or guilt or shame. And that is really what is, it's, one can put 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. That's the analogy of the ability of people. Hawkins laid it out as a logarithmic scale of consciousness, that every level was 10 times greater than the level before it. So for that reason, somebody that was up here would have the ability to impact more people that were vibrating at that lower frequency.
Thank God.
And which made me think of the words of some words from a poem that I wrote, because I've written quite a bit of poetry too, in addition to that. Just trying to recall the exact, that create, heal, and restore. That's what the power you possess is for. Loose humanity from every chain of fear and doubt and guilt and pain. For when you see clearly yourself in them, no longer in darkness will you condemn. For when your perception is darkness and hate, it's your own prison you perpetuate.
Yes. Beautiful. Maybe when I post that, maybe you could maybe you could add that in the thread, because that's gorgeous, and I couldn't, of course, write it all down.
Yeah, I would share the whole poem, which is was one of the first poems that ever came to me. It was back in my Goldsmith period. I can refer to the stages of my experience with different, this was my Goldsmith period, this was my EB period,
Yes.
this is my Course in Miracles period.
That's awesome. I hear you. I totally hear you.
Yeah.
So if people want to be in touch, what's the best way?
Well, there's a couple different ways. Yeah, there's my email, my spiritual email that I use for that purpose is integralspirit777@gmail.com.
Okay.
And again, I did start a YouTube channel called that hasn't really taken off yet, but this might be the first video that I post on it. Is Infintegral, which is again infinitely integral. If you looked up infinitely integral, you'd probably find it too. And then I do have a Facebook page called Integral Spirituality, and there's a group that is on Facebook called the Christ Consciousness Collective. There's also, somebody wants to become a member of that, then they would, I post my writings, different articles and things on there, and on integral spirituality. They're connected. Both of them are connected.
Yeah.
Because Christ Consciousness Collective goes beyond simply Christianity, in my experience anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a growing picture, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, that's wonderful. Do you have any final words or something that you came wanting to say that hasn't been said?
We could probably carry this conversation
I know, we could go
on
10 hours.
for another 3 hours exactly.
Yeah, so
or longer, until we fall out the window. But the analogy. But yeah, no, I think I feel very fulfilled in our conversation, Wendy.
good. All right.
Yeah, what needed to be shared was shared.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I look forward to sharing this.
All right. I appreciate that. Love you. Thank you so much.
Okay.